You clicked on this video as you want to see the most amazing chess game from this week, this month, year, maybe ever played online, as Magnus Carlsen is back in action, playing in the Champions Chess Tour, an online series of tournaments with the best players in the world participating. And Magnus is playing with the black pieces against a super talent from Belarus, 17 years old, Denis Lazavik. And it's an absolutely thriller of a game with so many interesting moments, things we can learn from these guys. What is going to happen exactly, you will just see, but I just encourage you to watch this video from the beginning till the end, because so many things are happening and you never know what's going to happen at the very end. Well, just one favor, hit the subscribe button. Thanks for doing that. And I will show you what happened in this game. It's a blitz game, played on chess.com, and the time control is 10 minutes for both players plus 2 seconds increment. Here we go. Denis Lazavik starts the game with 1d4, d5, c4, e6, queen's gambit declined, solid choice. And after knight f3, Magnus goes for this move, a6. It's one of his favorite pet lines, the Janovsky variation, and the idea of this little pawn move is to take next on c4, as you can then follow up with the move b5, setting up a very nice pawn chain on the queen side. Therefore, this is the moment for white to take on d5. Pawn takes d5, e takes d5, knight c3. And now, remarkable move, but it's another specialty of the world's #1. He goes for h6. And this is something I would not recommend you. If you're new to chess and you're thinking, who is this guy? It's world's #1, but he's violating the opening rules, not developing any pieces yet. We are on move 5, only making 2 pawn moves at the side of the board. You better try to get out your minor pieces as quickly as you can. But here, the idea of this move h6 is that if you play the normal developing move knight f6, the bishop comes out to g5 and your knight is kind of annoyingly pinned. So therefore h6, bishop now goes to f4 instead. Knight f6, e3, bishop d6. Black wants to trade off these pieces. It's a very solid system. At least that's how it starts. Bishop e5. So white says, okay, we can trade off bishops, but if you do that, I'm going to take with the pawn, attack your knight, and after that the pawn on d5 will be in trouble. So black cannot really take. Black played the move c6, supporting the pawn on d5 even more. The bishop comes out to d3. And in an earlier game, Magnus played against the reigning world champion the move bishop e7. It was a game of ding against Magnus Carlsen in one of the other online events. And, well, this time he goes for the main continuation, castling kingside, which I believe is a more sensible move. If you wanted to get your bishop on e7, there was no need to go first to d6 and then back to e7. So h3, rook e8, castling kingside. And now, finally, we see the tension being released. Bishop takes bishop, white recaptures with a knight, and is looking for ideas maybe to set up a nice bind in the center with a pawn move coming to f4. Therefore, it's very important that black is trying to add some pressure in the center. With the move c5, you're challenging the pawn on d4. White, of course, cannot take it because the pawn is needed on d4 to keep the knight defended. And, well, black does have another idea with this move too, because if white plays a random move, probably black is going to follow up with c4 to attack the bishop and then play the move b5. And then you do get a very nice pawn chain with chances to seize the initiative on that queen side. Well, therefore, Lazavik played the move a4. He discourages black from playing that move b5 anytime. But after pawn takes d4, e4, knight comes to c6, attacking the pawn on d4. White captures the knight. Black does take back. And here, white plays the move a5. So the idea is that very soon the knight wants to get in to a4, maybe to c5, and the pawns are being fixed on the light square. So positionally speaking, on that side, on the queen side, black is facing some potential problems, but that's not the only part of the board. So there is rook b8. So black makes use of the half-open b file, hits the pawn on b2. Of course, white is going to defend the pawn. How to do that? Well, queen d2 was played in the game, so you do keep that pawn on b2 defended, indirectly the pawn on d4 as well, and even the pawn on a5. So this looks like a very solid move. But here, knight comes in to e4 to attack the queen. And it's a very active spot for the knight. Knight takes e4. Knights are getting exchanged. Pawn takes back, hits the bishop. Bishop comes to c4. And now the queen comes to d6. So the queen is nicely placed in the center. And, well, white played here the move rook f e1. But here, black goes for the move c5. Wants to get rid of that pawn weakness. Threatens to take the pawn on d4. And of course that pawn is pinned, because the queen on d2 is unprotected. Therefore, the move d5 is played. And here, the bishop goes to d7. Now you understand why the queen is placed on d6. Normally speaking, it's not such a good blockader, the queen, because it's the most valuable piece, and you normally want to other pieces do that job. But here the queen defends the pawn on a6, stops the pawn on d5, and there's another benefit of having the queen on d6. White goes rook ac1. And you can always consider playing a move like bishop b5, trying to exchange bishops, but Magnus doesn't want to do that. He has different ideas in mind. He started the game very solidly, but the board has been divided in two parts. Black is better on the king side. Thanks to the pawn on e4, he now seizes the initiative with the move f5, defending the pawn. But after queen c3, the pawn even goes further to f4. This is great. This is a fantastic pawn block with ideas of trying to open up the king side anytime soon. White played here the move bishop f1, so the bishop already comes back to guard its own king. Of course, the pawn on d5 can be taken, but you better don't do that, because it runs into bishop c4, losing your queen thanks to a skewer. So instead, black played here the move rook b to c8. As the pawn had to be defended now, white was attacking it with both the queen and rook. So the queen and rook of black are defending the pawn on c5. Well, white is looking okay, but you got to reckon with these pawns on e4 and f4. Queen b3 played, protecting the pawn on d5, but what is it doing? It seems like a very, very slow move. And here Magnus just no longer waits, just breaks open up the king side with the move e3. This is a pawn sacrifice. White captures the pawn. And of course the e3 square is nicely supported by the queen and rook. So taking there will only help white to consolidate the situation on the board. But the main idea here is the follow-up f3. Such a thematical sacrifice. So that the pawn on e3 is hindering the queen from helping in defense. f3 is a great move. If you do take the pawn, it's queen g3. And your king is in big trouble. Pawns are hanging. If you play something like bishop g2, there's bishop takes h3 with mating threats. That's not going to be fun. Maybe it's still playable for white, but not fun at all. Instead, white played here the move e4, defending the pawn on d5 and more importantly, connecting the queen with the king side again. But what does Magnus Carlsen have in mind here? Look at this. f2. Absolutely insane idea. Super strong. Just attacking the king. It's a check. Attacking the rook. King gotta take it. And now the queen comes into h2. The idea is that the king can never get back into its cage. The king is now forced to stay in the center. And that gives, of course, the black pieces, especially the best ones, a great chance to target that king. The queen comes to e3 to support the pawn. Rook b8 is played. So black is threatening to win the pawn on b2, but white goes b3. And how to proceed? There are various interesting options, including a move like rook b4 with ideas to exert more pressure against the pawn on e4. And well, the rook is having a great time on that square. But Magnus had a different plan. He played rook f8 check, which is probably even more natural. And look at this. After the move king e2, Magnus, he's at this point 2 pawns down. But look at this. c4 is played, pawn number 3. If you do take with the rook, it's bishop to b5 and the rook is pinned. So that means you're going to win back material while the king stays in the center. So instead, white decided here to take with the b pawn. But now the rook comes in to b2 with check. And look at this. Rooks are taking away a lot of squares. If king goes to d1, it's bishop a4 with check and mate very likely coming soon. White is forced to give up material here. So the king has to go to d3. Normally that is not a safe square at all, but this is why the game is already so memorable. Look at this, the king in the center, being surrounded by these 3 pawns. The files towards the king are closed, but the other pieces, the black pieces, have already found ways to infiltrate. You wish you could give a check on b3 to win the queen, but there is rook c3 and white holds on. So instead, queen e5 is a great move. So the c3 square is covered by the queen, and the main threat is to go rook b3, winning the queen anyway. And if you do play something like queen d4 to offer the exchange of queens, well, there's this trick, rook d2, deflecting the king. If you take it, there's queen takes d4, game over. So white played the move rook c3 to guard the 3rd rank. And for now, the king still does look safe, being surrounded by the rook and the queen. No checks are possible here, no good ones at least. But other pieces are joining the action now immediately. The bishop comes in to a4, taking away squares from more white pieces. And who knows, maybe some checks with the bishop are possible at some point. White play the move bishop e2, trying to untangle, getting the bishop involved. But the next move played by Magnus is absolutely amazing. What a great shot here. The move rook f2. Placing the rook on the square where it can just be taken by the queen. What an amazing idea. So what is Magnus contemplating here? If this rook is going to be taken by that queen, there is bishop c2 check. And the king is in big trouble. If you go with the king to e3, it's queen takes e4. And the position is falling apart. If you do play king d2, well, there's bishop takes e4, discovered check. And after the king goes away, it's queen takes c3. You're winning the rook and mate will follow very, very soon. However, after bishop c2, you're wondering, why not just rook takes c2? Look at this. Magnus had calculating all of this. Otherwise, you would never sacrifice all your material. There is rook b3 check. The king got to go back to d2. Then it's queen g5 and the queen is giving a check. The rook is covering the 3rd rank. The king is forced to go back to d1. And now it's rook b1 check, rook c1, and taking the rook leads to checkmate. Fantastic line. Of course, Lazavik understood that Magnus is not blundering the rook. He was calculating here and decided that rook cannot be taken. He went for the move queen c1, attacking the rook on b2. But are you going to take that rook very soon or not? Well, Magnus can move the rook away, but he played here this move, rook takes g2. So that rook can also be taken. That rook was captured actually, but it does allow the move rook g3 with a huge threat on the 3rd rank. But at this point, Denis Lazavik is down to 6 seconds. Magnus has something like 45 seconds. And you would expect him to be completely winning. However, look at this. King d2 was played. And this is the crucial moment in the game. Magnus spent only like 1 or 2 seconds on his next move and missed the opportunity to deliver checkmate. Can you see it? Pause the video and let me know if you can find it or not. Well, he can just play here a mate in 2. Queen f4 is check with the same mating idea basically as we've seen earlier, because this bishop covers the light squares and the queen also covers the c1 square. After rook e3, it's queen takes e3 with checkmate. That means that the last move of white, king d2, is a huge blunder. Instead, what white should have done here still is the move bishop f3. And if you give that bishop after rook takes with check, you can block with your rook, and mate has been avoided for now. It's still super complex. Black, of course, should keep the rooks on the board, and maybe white is better objectively speaking, but far from simple with such a king in the center, and very difficult to advance your pawns anytime soon. Back to the game. After king d2, Magnus didn't play queen f4. Play the move queen d4 check. And, well, how is white going to solve it? Well, if you do play king c1, it's rook takes c3 check. And if the king goes to b1, it's rook b3 and the queen is lost. So, bishop to d3 is a possibility. But now, what is Magnus doing? Still playing super fast, playing against his opponent's lack of time, but missing a second opportunity. But the second one is very understandable because he missed the first mating chance as well. With the move queen f2 is just leading to checkmate in a few moves. If you do play bishop e2, there is queen f4 with the same mating idea again. If you do play instead rook e2, there is queen f4 also. King has to go back to e1, and then it's rook g1 with checkmate. If you miss the mating pattern at once, it's very likely you're missing it later as well. However, Magnus had a different plan. After bishop d3, he thought, okay, I can simply take on d3. Rook takes d3, and now you win the queen. But it isn't over yet. King comes to e3. White is having two rooks against a queen and a bishop, but also white still has this huge pawn chain, which can come forward. Is black able to play for mating attack, or should he try to stop these pawns? Well, first, bishop c2, attacking the rook. The rook doesn't go away, but instead, it's rook e2, pinning the bishop on c2. Queen to c1. It is check. And the rook is also hanging, so the rook gotta go back. Rook dd2, queen g1, rook f2, queen e1 check, rook fe2, queen g1, rook f2, repetition of moves. But Magnus wants to keep the game going. Bishop a4, bishop goes back, trying to stop the pawns. But white is moving it anyway. c5, queen goes back to attack the pawn. And, well, there are various options. But look at this idea. If you play something like king d4, you can try to let your king support the pawns. And who is actually playing here for a win? Anything can happen. However, in the game, they follow the move c6. And now the queen comes to c5 with check. The king can go away. And here, the pawn on a5 can be taken, but facing such very impressive pawn chain with 3 connected passed pawns, you feel more like you need to stop these pawns first. Bishop b5 is played in the game. Everything is under control. White goes rook c2 to attack the queen. Queen goes to a3. The king goes back to g2. And here the bishop comes to d3, attacking the rook, attacking the pawn as well. But look at this. White ignores it. Play the move c7. Threatening to promote the pawn. No time to take the rook. Well, anyway, first you want to take the pawn on e4 with check. King goes to h2. And of course, still the rook can't be taken because white does promote its pawn with the move c8. Therefore, queen d6 is played instead. White moves his king to g1. Then it's queen to g3. And what to do now? Look at this. Well, you can move your king to f1, but maybe it's bishop d3. And they follow this long sequence of moves, which was not all played in the game. It's just an illustration. You can just give up that rook for the bishop. And the rook is still pretty strong, supporting that pawn from behind. And white should be able to hold this with the support of the other pawn. You're able to pose a lot of threats against black's back rank. Black probably has to give a perpetual here. Anyway, this didn't happen. Rook g2 was played. And the rook can't be taken once again because of c8 queen, and white wins. Therefore, black keeps on giving checks. Queen e3, king h2, queen f4. And, well, the rook comes to g3. And now the pawn is almost unstoppable. You can still stop it with bishop f5. So the bishop controls the promotion square, but white goes c8 queen. Bishop takes, rook takes, check, king h7. Now all of a sudden it's two rooks versus a queen. Are the rooks better here? No. Is the queen better? No way. What is going on? It's sort of a very balanced position with white going to keep its rooks connected to avoid any sort of stupid double attack ideas. You're ready to give up your pawn on d5. It's a double attack by the queen. The king goes to g1. Black takes the pawn. You put a rook on a3 to prevent black from capturing that pawn on a5. And black can just keep on playing here. Play the move g5, the rook goes away, you make sure you don't lose your queen or you don't blunder a rook. So white is going to stay on the third rank with its rooks to keep everything defended. Black is making progress with the king. Eventually the king will be pushed backwards. You put a rook on g3, you just make moves. White will allow the exchange of pawns, that's not a problem. The rook blocks the passed pawn. So you're not able to make progress. You can give a check. You put your king on the back rank and still everything is under control. King g5, rook g3, gd3, queen c1, king g2. And, well, the game goes on for a few more moves, but it's clear that the black king is unable to cross the third rank. And therefore, a repetition or a draw is simply inevitable. Queen c1, King F2, King F1, and, well, players just are not making any progress. So, what an amazing game. I hope you really found this to be also one of the most amazing online Blitz games from recent times. I mean, there were some mistakes, especially Magnus being up like 40 seconds on the clock, his opponent down to 6 seconds, Magnus missing twice a mate in 2. That's simply something we are not used from him, but it can happen, of course, when having such a tough schedule, playing so many tournaments in a row. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Let me know in the comments what you think of this game. Once again, hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for more exciting videos on this channel.